Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have Lynn. Lynn, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited for today because today is going to touch on something that I think scares a lot of developers, but that I think we all secretly wish we were better at, which is UI and UX work. Every time a developer makes something, we always say, well, I'm no designer, so this is what it is. And then it's like this source of like, oh, I wish I could just make things pretty. Um, but okay, before we talk about that, I'd love to talk about you. So for folks who aren't familiar with you or your work, do you want to give us a little bit of a background?
Sure. Well, I'm Lynn. I'm here in Las Vegas. I'm a self-taught designer and developer. Lived out in San Diego for most of my adulthood, but moved back here, where I am currently. My original career was in healthcare, worked in it for about 10 years.
Okay.
In hospitals, pharmacies, I was even a program director at a local college before I decided to design full time, loving every bit of it. So I love UI, UX. That's what pulled me into actually getting into the tech world, was designing. So that's where I'm at right now.
Nice. Very, very cool. So Las Vegas, which like are you like in Las Vegas proper? Or are you in kind of the greater sprawl?
I am outside of Las Vegas. So so whenever they say Las Vegas, people think like, oh, next to a casino. I'm probably about a good 30 minutes away from, like the strip and the
Yeah.
nightlife and the lights and everything. I would say that where I'm at, it doesn't look like you're in Vegas.
Mm.
It looks kind of, there's a little bit more trees. It's a lot cooler where I am, because I live closer to the mountains.
Oh, nice.
So I don't live in a casino. I'm not in
Yeah, I figured that's how it works, right? Is it like just the top floors are yours for the locals? That's right.
Yes, yeah. We have our own little section of the world above Las Vegas.
That's great. So okay, so let's talk a little bit about design. You mentioned that it's kind of what drew you into the tech world, and so how was that journey? Like, how did you? Well, I guess you called yourself a designer, and so what was the journey for you from like in the before times, before you would call yourself a designer until you felt like you were a designer? How did you like what was the transition for you? What did you kind of do to get to that level of confidence?
So I always felt like I was a designer. Since Windows 95 came out with Paint, I thought I was the greatest designer ever. So I always thought myself that way. But college, I had to choose something.
Sure.
So healthcare it was. Um, you know, Parents' choice. So went into that, and then as I was working, I would always try to find ways to design, redesign things, whether it was, their applications or, I worked for a school. So how to make the curriculum better, how to make it a little bit more interactive for the students,
Mm,
especially with technology moving the way it is, and the way that, COVID happened where everything went online. So that was kind of like a moving point where it was just like, I'm a designer. I want to do this, and this is like something that I feel like I'm good at and I like doing. So I transitioned that way. It was little trickles here and there, and then it just flooded and was like,
yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. So there's a little bit of terminology that I hear thrown around, and so I think it might be cool to just kind of set some expectations, especially for like chat for y'all who are watching. How many of you consider yourself to be designers? And if you don't consider yourself to be a designer, how like give yourself a letter grade on your design capabilities. Like, are you an A plus designer? Are you like a C minus designer? How do you do when you have to make something look nice, right? And while the chat is weighing in on their design self assessment of design skill, I'd love to just kind of enter some of the jargon. So you hear about design, right? And then you hear about sub disciplines of design that all kind of roll up to the broader thing. So we're talking about two of them today, UI and UX. So UI is user interface, UX is user experience, and those aren't the same thing. So could you talk a little bit about kind of what those are?
So they work together, but they are pretty different. UI, like you said, user interface, that's visual design. So like how the buttons look, how the screens look, the pages, how everything is going to flow together, look together. UX is the functionality and the experience of what's going to happen or what is happening. So it's their journey through the beginning to the end, from when they first land on your page all the way up to when they hit that sign up button. It's taking them on that journey. UX typically comes first because it's thinking about the journey and how they move through the pages. And then UI kind of like brushes up and make everything look good. And it's that aesthetic part of it. They both come with like research and feedback and iteration and doing that whole process. But it's only to make the design better, to make the experience and the interface cohesively work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good point too, because there are so many apps and sites that I use that I don't consider them to be aesthetically beautiful, but they're so easy to use. Like when I go through, all the buttons do what I expect. I can always find the thing I'm looking for. I'm never lost. I'm never like, oh crap, now what do I do? And then there are sites that are gorgeous, but I don't know where to click. Like a good example of what I would consider like the only focus on design sector of the industry is restaurant websites, right? Like you go to these fancy restaurant websites and they're beautiful, these big photos, and there's like, so many cool things happening. Soft music plays in the background. It's like, man, this is a beautiful website. And then you can't find the address, you can't find their hours, you don't know what the menu looks like. You're like,
exactly. They have to work together. It needs to have. We need to find a balance between, beauty and functionality, and that's where UI UX comes in. It's just that leveling of, I need it to work, but I still need it to look good, and vice versa. Like I want it to look good, but we still don't want to reinvent the wheel and move buttons where they shouldn't go, or that users aren't used to.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good point of like what people are used to. Like if you have an expectation of how a website works, you better have a good reason as a designer to change all of the expectations, right? And like there are reasons to do it, but I don't want to have to learn a full bespoke visual language to use your website. Like, it's like that was always my complaint about Snapchat. I still don't know how to use Snapchat. Like I could never figure out the controls because all of the UI stuff changed.
Yes. Yeah. And I know that Instagram did their update and there was a lot of complaint with the ad to their story moved from the bottom to the top. And users were very upset at first because they didn't understand like why they would move it, because they were already used to it being in a certain place. I mean, it makes sense now because now it's all grouped together at the top, but a big change like that could potentially disrupt, the experience for the user.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is, and so you talked about UI, you talked about UX, and it starts to have a little bit of a gradient between, like UI, you can say, all right, so this is pure aesthetics. You're going to be working in Photoshop or Sketch or Figma. When you start talking about UX, now you're talking about how things fit together. And so some of that feels like it's in, a design tool, and some of it starts to feel like code. So how much like code versus design do you find yourself doing both? Are you all on one side or the other? Where's your happy place on this?
For me, I really like both of it because when I was learning how to do UI, UX, coding, all of that, I felt like they all went together because, I would start thinking about what I wanted to design, which is your UX. Then I started to think about how I wanted it to look, and then I was UI. And then I decided like, well, how is it going to translate? And then there came in, like the coding part of it. And understanding the coding part of it was really helpful, because then it just makes your design stronger. So because you already know how it's going to translate, how it's going to look, how it's going to really be placed on the page, especially like responsiveness. You can't go too crazy with design because it may not be friendly to different browsers or to the way that the sizing are. It may look good on desktop, but it may not look good on mobile.
Sure.
So I think that I enjoy the from the beginning to the end. And like for the coders out there who are scared of design, it's actually not bad to go from coding to design because you already understand how it's going to translate and how it's going to work. It's just a matter of like taking the design and putting it into the code.
Yeah. And so so I think one of the reasons that certain folks are attracted to code is because there are rules and things work the same way and there's systems and you have predictability. And I think that design can feel more chaotic in that you can just make anything, any color, and you can move this box to anywhere on the page and there's no rules. But, you know, I'm kind of asking this as a loaded question because I've also done design in the past. But, you know, how do you feel about like design as being a lawless area? Do you feel like there are no rules in design?
I feel like there's some rules. There has to be some rules, because if we're talking about like the users, there are certain things that users are, you know, used to, or they're, you know, the psychology of it. Like if we're going into that, like I feel like there are boundaries to keep in design, but designing like graphic design, I feel like doesn't have any rules. Like they're a little bit more open to designing everything and anything and whatever they might come up with. But then when it comes to like using different frameworks or translating it into different platforms, then I think that there should be rules. There can be rules. I mean, not everybody listens to the rules. So I can't really say that there are, but personally, I have my set of rules on what I feel will be great UI, UX when translating into code, when designing. But when it's like graphic design, I think that's a little bit more open.
For sure. Okay, well, maybe this is a good transition point then to actually start playing around with some designs here. And so let me switch us over into the pair programming view. And before we get started, let's do a quick shout out to our captioning. We've got Jordan here from White Coat Captioning today, taking all the things that we're saying and turning them into accessible captions, which I very much appreciate. That is made possible through the support of our sponsors. We've got Netlify, Fauna, Hasura, and Auth0 all kicking in to make this show more accessible, which means a lot to me. That is all available on the homepage of the site, so go and check that out. While you're clicking things on the internet, you can go and follow Lynne on Twitter at Lynne Codes. And there's also Lynne on Instagram, lynne.uix. And you said this is where you're posting a lot of your work.
Yeah, like tips and tricks and everything that, you know, some stuff that I do when designing.
Yeah, that's great. And then all of that is rolled up at lynne.codes, which you can find there. And so today, I think we are going to just look at combining some of these tips and tricks, your combined experience, into how would one create a UI that has a good UX. So and just, you know, as developers who are trying to get into this stuff, how can we make it so that when we're designing a new website, if we need to stand up something for ourselves, or if we're at work and we don't have design resources, how can we do better? How can we make something that's going to get good results that people are going to be able to use and be happy to use because it looks nice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So if we want to do that, I'm using Figma. So for anybody who's not familiar, Figma is an online design tool. It is extremely good for this, and it has a lot available on the free tier. So that's what we'll be working today. What should I do if I want to get started? Like, what should my first move be?
First move is to create a frame.
Okay.
I mean, this comes also in when we're prototyping, or wireframing. UX usually starts with the experience, so we could create like a user journey map,
Sure.
if we wanted to. And that would just kind of go through the process of like what pages would be there, where would the user go from start to end.
Mm,
Um, I mean, we can create maybe just a simple app where we just have like the home screen, and then we can go to like a settings page, and then their landing page.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, a question came in from. Oh, hey Cap, how you doing? Kapehe asks, do you base your website designs off of one thing, like a logo or button, or do you do something else?
well, that's a very good question. I usually base my personal designs. I usually base it off of probably like an inspiration. If there's like a picture, I start with that.
Mm,
If I'm feeling like beachy, then I'll have like a picture of a beach, and then I'll just go from there. It's usually the feeling that the like an image would give me, and that's where I get my inspiration when it comes to colors, or if it's like for an app that's is supposed to help motivate you, then it'll be like a motivational image, and then I'll just pull colors from there, and the feeling of like what gets people going, and whatever that kind of like that picture like exudes, or
nice.
that image, and then if I'm designing um, for someone, or a client, then I would be looking at their logo, and then I would design based off of their color scheme, and their look and feel of their branding and their values, and then because I mean designing for um, designing for a site that is mainly like for kids, it's different
Mm,
than a site that's going to be their audience is more like tech.
right.
So it's all on branding, and then that's where I start to draw inspiration from that, and then colors, and then finding what really the tone is.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So, as we're starting, I've got this selection of frames here. So, when you design, do you prefer to start with a mobile layout? Do you start with a desktop layout? Do you try to do all of them at once? What's your typical starting point?
So the rule is supposedly that you're supposed to start mobile first.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because mobile is a smaller screen. So if you start on desktop, a lot of things that you're going to be designing is really big,
Mm-hmm.
because your desktop starts to be, 1440 and up. Um, and once you try to view it on your phone, everything shrinks down quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit. So designing on mobile first is the general rule. So that how it looks on mobile, and then you can always expand your pictures. You can always expand, the text, make them larger or to fit the larger screen rather than bringing it down.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll do mobile first, because that's the general rule. And then, like all good things on a homepage, we have our navigation.
Okay.
Um, that's usually where I go next, because that's what users usually look for,
And so,
is
do
their
you want to
navigation.
set this up as
Mhm.
like a wireframe, or do you want to kind of pick some navigation? So let's say, so our app, you said let's do an app where we've got some settings. Maybe what our app can be is to give us a really simple workflow so that we don't have to get into a bunch of edge cases. It's an app where you push a button to get a photo of something cute.
Yeah.
So I default to corgis, but what's your favorite? What's like your, like if you're looking for a cute animal to brighten your day up, what's your go-to?
Cute animal to brighten my day up. Um, well, I have a dog, and I have a Shiba Inu, and I think he's the best dog ever. So I'm going to go with a Shiba Inu.
All right. So this is an app where this is going to be an app it's an app to cheer you up. You will open it up, you will be able to push a button, and you will get a picture of a Shiba Inu. And maybe the setting would actually let you choose what animal you're going to get a cute picture of. And so now we've got like two flows, right? Push a button, get a picture, go to settings, and change the cute thing that you get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So did you want to wireframe that, or do you want to try to just like let it rip and design it?
We'll just let it rip.
Okay.
We'll just get going. Okay. So since we're on mobile, since it's just going to be something that pulls up an image, there's not necessarily a navigation menu. Um, because are we just talking about the page, or are we going to start from the beginning where you can click to go to find a?
Let's think about. Let's probably keep it simple, right? Like you'll load this site. So let's think about it like a website. So you go to a web address, and the web address will be like showmesomethingcute.com or something like that, right? And so when you show up, it's just a button.
Yeah. Okay.
And then maybe we can like have a settings thing that would. So what is that? Like a little logo that says what the site is, a little settings thing so that you can change what the thing is that you're going to see, and then a button. And when you click the button, it shows a photo. That's a pretty straightforward app, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So then we want to make the header bar,
Okay.
and then we want to put that logo for our for this Get Cute photo app right there on the top left hand corner. That is something that is mainly, don't reinvent the wheel. Most logos are located on the top left hand corner. And that's where the users usually go when they want to go back to the home screen. They mostly automatically know to click that, it just automatically takes them there. So our logo will go on the top left. And if it's just a icon logo, then we will have it spelled out. So for example, if it's just a logo of a dog, and so we'll write Get Cute Photo App on there, unless the logo is Get Cute Photo App, we don't want to repeat it on the logo and right next to it. So we'll have that there. And then right in the middle is where we're going to generate the photo. So what we're going to do is we are going to make a space for the photo to generate.
Okay. So like the photo goes here or something?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That looks good. We can move it down a little bit because we're able to change the settings on what we're looking for. That right above the picture, because now we're talking about hierarchy. A good thing about hierarchy is that it's also good for accessibility when there's screen readers or anything like that. So the user can go through, so they know that the logo's at the top, and then they can edit what they're searching for, and then that picture is supposed to pop up right on the bottom of it.
Great.
Otherwise, if we had it the other way, if the picture was on top of that, then it would say like, oh, here's the picture of this. And then they would have like the settings on the bottom, which wouldn't really make any sense because it already generated a picture on there without them being able to select their options. And so above that, we're going to put a space for like choose your animal, I guess that's what it is.
Okay.
And then or choose your preference or picture or so a good thing to know when making search bars. I was going to say we could do a search bar, but that would us being very familiar with the developer's perspective on how they're going to pull the images and how they're going to be able to search the data for all the pictures that are generating. It's not an easy, like the easiest task to do if when working with developers. So that would be us talking to them saying like, hey, can we do a search bar here or drop down, or how are we how are we gathering the information? That would be something good to know as like the UX and UI in the process of designing it.
Yeah.
If you get that question from the developer answered on how they pull information.
And so let's assume for our purposes, we're going to use dog CEO. So the only thing you can choose is a dog. But I think in here you can get a random. So maybe by default, you just get a random dog. But then I think you have an option to, here's the documentation. You can get any breed.
Okay.
And so I think we can just get like, yeah. So if I can't change that. But if we do any hound, right? So if you chose a Shiba Inu, it would pull a random image of a Shiba Inu every time you push the button. And that would let us do, look at that one.
That's a very pretty looking dog.
that is a well-coiffed dog. It also looks like a unicorn because of this.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can actually, since that's what, if that's what we're pulling from, if we can filter by breed, then we can actually put that option on there to filter by breed. So at least they have that option. If we're okay, so say that we're using this, so to be like cute dog app. So then we have a photo filter right there, so then they can find their breed, and then that photo will generate. It'll generate in this box. Then right under there, that's where we'll have the button to generate. Most buttons, the call to actions are after the information that we're using, so that the users know to click that and then it'll go somewhere. Buttons usually stay at the bottom of your page, especially if
so like here.
You can do it there, but I would put it closer to the photo just so that they know that they're together. Cool. I was just saying like at the bottom of the information.
Oh yeah, so like at the bottom of whatever the thing is that we're doing.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Just so that they know that, okay, it's like a go button, it's like a next button. Their experience wise, the users are looking for that button at the end of a document, to go next or to click go or to for it to do something on that page. Gotcha. So we'll have that there. And then the photo would generate here.
What's up, Semantics Dev, with a double raid? Interesting. We got two raids from Semantics Dev. I hope you had fun on your stream today. Welcome. We're designing stuff. It's gonna be, we're doing an app where you're gonna be able to go to an address, and then you're gonna be able to push a button and get a picture of a dog. And I already have an idea for the URL, but I have to go see if it's available, and then I'm gonna actually build this because it makes me smile.
That'll actually be really fun.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be a fun one. I really love the idea of just it's like, hey, you're having a bad day, come push this button a few times.
I think Kapehi said, are you able to read that? I can't read that.
Yeah, she says, is there a design rule on how big a button should be compared to the surrounding things? Like, should it be the size of the photo or should it be smaller? Does it matter?
I would say it depends on how many buttons there are. 70% is good. If we're aligning, if the button's going to be like a square like this, I think that the button's actually okay to be the size of the photo if the photo is going to be square. If we're looking for more rounded, I would make it a little smaller, only because then the rounded starts to take up too much of the space. As we talk about desktop, then yes, it's going to be probably about maybe, I would say like 70% of the photo, because the photo would be a little larger. But for mobile, I think that the size of it is good because when thumbs need to push the button and we want it big enough for the thumb to actually press the button, but not too big, where it's like taking over the whole page, but not too small that we can't find it or we can't press it. But on
Right.
desktop, it'll be a little smaller because, we're using a mouse, we can click it. And against the photo, it'll be too wide if we're looking at like a full-size desktop.
Nice.
So it'll just depend on mobile to desktop.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of just like blocking this out here. So I figure we can go in and actually do a little bit of design once we've got the pieces in place. But yeah, I've definitely found that, like, to me, the right size of a button is the thing that looks like a button that's big enough for me to click. And if those two things are true, I tend to be pretty happy about the button on the page.
Yes, exactly. You want it to be noticeable. You don't want it to look like just everything else on your page, because then it'll just kind of like fall into the background. Then nobody knows it's a button. Nobody ever clicks on it, and then you'll never get any cute photos of dogs because you never click it.
And that would be a tragedy.
Yes. So we want it big enough on mobile for users to be able to find and click it using their thumbs.
Look at this dog. Okay. So this got an actual like audible reaction from me. So I think this is a good starting point for our, you said that you use these for inspiration, right? So
yes, I do. So now we're going for that beachy, fun, dog in the sun feel.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a fun app.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So basically this is all the app's doing. Experience-wise, what we want them to experience is we want to experience the joy of finding photos of dogs, but by keeping it simple, by having just one button to show me a dog, and they'll be able to filter it and choose what breed of dog they would want it or to see. We don't have to worry about back buttons, or we don't have to worry about any navigation, only because this is the only thing that the app is doing. Yeah. When we are talking about, the apps and making sure that we are designing for UI, the three main things that I like to make sure is that it's consistent. So consistent with the branding. So here, beachy dog theme, we're going to go with that. And then if it's responsive, so we're going to make sure that we're going to respond this to desktop, starting with mobile. And then we're keeping it simple. So simple is good. We don't want to overcomplicate things, especially if it's a simple app like this. We don't want to add things or words that doesn't need to be there, make things too wordy or confusing for users. We can put a little instruction on there, but this is pretty much self-explanatory, where it says, show me a dog, you click it, it'll show you another dog. Show me a dog, click it, it'll show you another dog. When it becomes a little bit more complicated, we don't want too much information on the page. And if we do happen to have more information that we need to put out there for the users, breaking them down in different paragraphs or sections is very helpful. Readers usually tend to fall off when there's like a very long paragraph, because they're not going to read all of that. One, it hurts the eyes, and two, it's attention span.
Sure.
Yeah. So big blocks of color and separation really helps. Lots of white space helps as well when it comes to like breaking down information.
Nice. And so speaking of spacing, Komodo Kano just asks, how do you decide on the spacing between various items on the page? What do you have any kind of general guidelines or just mental rules you follow?
So I think of them as like sections or categories. So each section will stay together, and then there will be a bigger gap between the sections. So photo, filter, photo, and then the show me a dog, those all go together. So I would space them a little closer together than say that we had like two sections of that, like show me a dog, and then the next one was like show me a cat. Then the show me a dog and show me a cat section would be further spaced apart.
Or like
Just
maybe we
to
even
show,
have just a like a footer, right? And the
Mhm.
footer is going to be down below, and that'll have some extra details here. Like we want to have
Mhm.
credits and stuff like that, you know. So we'll want to make sure that we link to the Dog CEO API and
Mhm.
some stuff like that. Link to the source code, maybe link to the show where we designed it.
Yeah.
And so more spacing here, and then these are kind of logically grouped.
Yes, logically grouped. They'll still have spacing between them. You don't want them to have be too close together, only because then it just starts to mesh together, and there's no way for the eye to separate, the filter tab versus the photo versus the button. Because once the button is filled with color, it's going to merge into that photo, and then you can't find the button again. So we do want to have separation between like paragraphs in a section, but we want to have more spacing between different sections.
Right.
So just like that, like how you're showing like the footer at the bottom, there's a good separation between it, because if the show me a dog is way too close to it, then it looks like the footer is a part of that show me a dog section.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So my
Okay.
general rule is at least double the space between sections of the actual spacing between paragraphs.
Yes, that
So I
totally
double
makes
to
sense.
triple it. Yeah.
And a little trick in Figma, if you're looking to do that, is if you select one of these and then you hold Alt, it'll show you how far it is between. Like I'm just holding Alt and hovering over something, and it's showing me how far it is. So I can kind of see here that, this one, it's 42 pixels from the button and 29 pixels from the filter. So maybe I want that to be more even, right? So I can go here and I can go like down one. So now it's 30. And then I can take.
A really cool way to do that is if you just highlight or if you select those three boxes, and then on the top, right, can you see my mouse? Yes, you can. Oh, but you can't. I don't have the. Okay.
I think it
So
might be.
on the top right, you can right there. You can just distribute them evenly spaced. So then right below the degrees. So if you go back into
let me get it open again. Right below the degrees.
And you can adjust the spacing between them there. So if you make it lower, if you want it 20 pixels between.
Oh, look at that.
Yes, it'll actually, adjust it for you.
Very cool.
Then you can keep it consistent. So when you start to have more pages, another UI rule would be to keep it consistent between all your pages. So that there is that flow, that same flow. Then we can go back here and say like, okay, there's 30 pixels in between each paragraph. So each paragraph is going to be 30 pixel spacing.
Nice. Okay.
Then when the developer comes in and codes it, then they can go in there and look, okay, they use 30 pixels spacing here. So that's a really good tool to use.
It also does no, not there. Inspect. Look, it'll show you the CSS for this, which is really, really, really cool. This part, like the position absolute in the left top, is a little bit less useful in most cases, but it'll show you the width and the height. It'll show you the background. Like it's very cool to have that kind of information where you can sort of see at a glance what each of these things is. And if you edit these to have actual names, like they show up in the CSS with that label. So Figma is a very, very cool tool if you have not used this one.
It is.
Okay, so let's see if we can let's see if we can start pulling some of this stuff in, right? So we've got our wireframe and we know where things are going to go. So what would you do first if you were going to turn this into a finished design?
The first thing I would do, if we have it, would be the logo, or putting that name up there, just so usually I'll pull from the logo first, like that inspiration.
Okay, I have an idea to make this simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make us a little circular logo, and I'm going to take our dog, and let's see, we'll move this back. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move
Create a logo.
backward. How do I do that? I need to arrange. Send to back. And then if I click this one, then there's this mask button. I always get this wrong the first time. So let's see if I got it right. Aha! Okay, so here's, whoops, got to group these two. And then I can like put a, can I put a stroke on it or something? Yeah, so let's do a stroke on the outside of, oh, that's not going to work, is it? And the reason that's not going to work is because everything is masked, which means if I want to do anything with this, I need to like take this and put it up here, but make it not a mask. Stop it. There you go. And then I can get rid of this. And now we've got like kind of thing, right?
Yeah. It's cute.
Oh, I just realized all the colors in this that we can pull.
There you go.
Oh,
it'd be like very festive, like a fiesta.
Yeah, maybe I'll pull like this one. You look happy. There, that's okay. All right. What do you think about that?
That's actually a very good way to do it too when you're thinking about UI, is to pull colors from, like if you're pulling from the logo or from like an image like this. I usually get my color schemes that way. Is not just inspiration, but everything from it.
Yeah, that tends to be like, I feel very much the same about that, where I'm always like, all right, what did they send me a logo? Great, let's pull all the colors from the logo. Or did they send me like, here's the promotional image, let's pull all the colors out of the promotional image. And then you start with a palette, like it all feels cohesive. And
the great thing about it is because it's an image, you already know that the colors go well together. So that's like a way to cheat, finding a color palette or finding a good color scheme. Is to just pull it from images because you already know how they visually look together.
Okay, so let's maybe put this at like, let's go with 80 pixels. That seems like a good size. And then this can be our logo. So then I can drop out the logo part here. And then like, do we need a header bar or should we?
We don't need a bar. No. A lot of unless we're doing like a navigation, we really don't need the navigation bar because this is all that's gonna go on there. But yep, there you go.
Okay. Do you have any like rules for choosing fonts?
That goes along with my inspiration. So now that we're doing like a beachy fun theme, I would say that a beachy fun theme is more sans serif handwriting type of fonts.
Let's see what the handwriting looks like. Do any of these jump out at you? This one kind of does.
Pacifico is a good one.
Yeah,
those are good one for headers and titles. When you're using cursive, just to be careful, you don't want to put cursive all over your page because it's hard to read for some people. But if it's going to be a large heading, then cursive is okay. It works. If you're just using it maybe in like one or two places. But as like the whole app itself.
Gotcha. So maybe not that then, maybe not a cursive because we want to be able to use it in a couple places like on the buttons and stuff. So maybe we want, did any of these jump out at you?
Let's see here. Scroll up a little. Scroll down, up, down. Okay, wait, no.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Let's go with something that is a little, okay, scroll. I'm here like scrolling on my,
Sorry.
and I was like, why isn't it moving? I think this one in the middle works. This, yeah,
Sriracha?
yeah,
Okay, let's see.
because
I
it's fun.
think
It's a little fun.
it is
Let's
already
see,
loaded. I love that. So Figma also has all of the Google fonts just like
loaded,
loaded, which
which
is
is amazing.
so nice.
Yes, it is. So that's a fun one.
And then
Um,
maybe, how would you pick? Okay, so here's a question. Right now we have a white background and we have black
mhm,
text, and this is pure black, and the background is pure white. How
mhm.
do you typically like? Do you just roll with that, or do you have some rules about the way you choose those?
I do have some rules when I choose those. Black on white and white on black is very bold, uh, very bright. I think at some point. So I would usually, if I'm keeping with a white background, I would go for maybe like a darker gray. And then if I'm going with like a black background, then it'll be a lighter gray, but not white or not black.
Mm,
Only because it's like on here, it's very bright, like a bright black. And then if you see white on black, then it's pretty bright on the eyes.
mm-hmm,
And that's going a little into accessibility,
mm-hmm.
because we have to work with like contrasts and making sure that users are still able to read the text,
Right.
whether what size it is, and then what color it is.
Nice. Okay, so one way that I've done this in the past, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is I'll just start looking at an image and I'll look for some of the grays, and they're
Yeah.
never all the way black, right? So
Yeah.
this is like a
Yeah.
dark gray, or we
Hmm.
could even look over here and like this is a little bit lighter. And so then it's like this is so subtle that you might not even notice the difference, but to the folks in the
Yeah.
chat, like look at the difference between, so this is the 262D2F, right? And so it's like a, it's a lighter gray. And then if I go back to the pure black, it just gets a little more like harsh on the eyeballs, right? Like
Yes.
you can
Exactly.
see that just that subtle shift, and it I swear it makes all the difference in the world.
It does. And it's not noticeable. Some people will think it's black. So they kind of don't notice until it's put against black.
Mm-hmm.
And same goes for white when it's on a darker background. Like you don't notice until you see it side by side, but it does make a very, very big difference.
And
Um,
to go back to your other point, because I used a gray from the image, now our font colors, like our typography, is going to be like on like in theme with the image that we're using for our logo.
mhm. It's just blending everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to do.
And
So
I
that,
swear, the more I've learned about design, the more that I've started to just embrace that it is tons and tons of subtle little things that make a page feel like it belongs together.
mhm. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got a logo, we've got some logo text, we've got a
Mhm.
font. I'm ready to rock and roll here. What?
Okay. So let's start. Speaking about like spacing. So we gave spacing between this section and the footer. We want to do the same for the header,
Okay.
because it looks like it's too far to the top. We want to like maybe, since it's the only thing on the page, maybe set it in the middle of the footer and the header, just so it's visually symmetrical when you're looking at it.
Yeah. So maybe we can put the credits in, so we can say like, created by Lynn and Jason. We can make this font a lot smaller. Let's make it like
Mhm.
16 pixels, and then we'll center it. And then we can put all of this right here. And maybe, okay, so we'll have, I'll eventually add some more links and stuff in there, but for now, that'll be roughly what it is. And
Yeah.
so this one too is set to be this pure black, but it feels like maybe I don't want to do this black. Wait, what did I just do? I feel I'm on a smaller screen now, and so I can't see what the. Can I get you to go away? Okay, so you go away, and then I can actually see what I'm selecting here. So let's select that. This feels like it should be a lighter color, right? So how would
So
you?
yes. So because it's a footer, we want to really separate it from like have that separation. So we actually want to keep that background on the footer.
Oh, okay, great. Let me put it back here.
Sorry, I was gonna tell you, but
So I mean, it's fine.
so let's keep that and I could show you, let's do it opposite. So then we can put the background to that dark gray color. And then,
Ah,
yeah, and then we can flip it. So then we'll have a light gray color for the text.
okay. So I've got that, and then
Mhm.
our text is currently
Yep. And so now let's look for a lighter color, like a lighter gray.
okay. So let's
Okay.
see if we can find one in here. So I'm gonna grab my dropper tool again,
Mm-hmm.
and let's move this out of the way, and so we can just kind of hop in here and look at what about one of these.
That would work.
Ta-da! And so this has, I think this has good contrast.
Yes. Yeah.
Do we have testing here? I can't remember. I don't think it does. We don't quite have. I feel like that's a tool that you can install, but we don't have it yet.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it's something, it's a separate thing. I know I had to install a separate thing too. But it looks
so
good.
yeah, and then if
It's
we look at the whole thing together,
it's coming together.
that looks pretty balanced, like these pieces. And I think this will shift even a little bit more when we turn these into actual controls.
Yep. Okay. So now that we have our footer and our header, now we can go ahead and um, do our photo filter. Since that's at the
Okay.
top, we can go ahead and do that.
All right. So let's do this. Um, let's assume it's going to be a drop down because we get
Okay.
a list of breeds, I
Breeds.
think.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to. Do I get a full list? I'll be able to find
Oh,
it,
I
but
think you just
oh, this is
put
the
it in
full
there.
list.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to kind of go through here and get all of these. Does it let me just like type Shiba? No.
Ah,
Right. But so this is what it'll look like by default. Is it'll basically we'll push a button
yeah.
and we get a random dog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we'll need a drop down like this so that we can choose what we want to see.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay. So first we want to put the text on there. Choose your dog or
We could even just default it to like Shiba.
okay.
And I guess we'll use what the dog CEO thing uses. So we'll default it there. And then do you have a what so we've used this as our heading font, but I assume that's probably not what we want to do for the whole app.
No, no. We can use just a sans serif. I think will be fine for the rest of the text.
Okay. So Roboto is a default. I think the computer default, like I'm on a Mac, so this
Mhm.
is like the Mac default. So we could just
Yeah,
set
we
the
can.
app to use our default font, and that'll be good.
Now, what's the sizing on there? It's pretty big.
It is pretty big, so I think we've got this thing set to be it's like 60 pixels tall and 327 wide. Like it's pretty large.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty big. We could probably decrease the size on it a little.
Okay.
Um, just because it's on mobile, it's going to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think about that and how it's going to look on our phones.
So do you think like 50 tall or so,
I
or
think 50. I
Yeah.
usually go with 50.
Okay. And then our font size right now is 26, which is a pretty decently big size. I think
Mm-hmm.
the default for a browser is 16. So like if we
16.
didn't touch it, this is what the default would be, which feels a bit tiny.
It feels a bit tiny. We could probably do 20, maybe
Okay.
somewhere in the middle. Yeah,
Okay. That
I
looks
think
good. I
that's
like
fine.
that.
Yeah, it's a good size. Because I know that it's like when we're designing it, because I've come across this many times where when I'm designing it, it feels very small. So I try to make things bigger, but then when it's on the actual like phone or desktop, it's huge.
Hmm.
It's a lot bigger than what I expected it to be because it's different when you're actually holding it in your hand and you're looking at it versus like I could zoom in on my computer or zoom out because it's not, of course, the actual viewing size
Right.
unless we're prototyping it and hitting that play button.
Yeah.
And so I think 20 is a good size. I think anything larger than that, then we're start to get into like that heading,
Hmm.
like the header type sizes. So I think that's good. And that's going to have a drop down so we can get a little icon for a little drop down or a little caret. I think there's a triangle in there, a
Yeah.
polygon. Yeah. So we can just do a simple one. And then we can actually choose the color for this too.
Okay. So if I'm gonna make this just so we can see it right now, I'm gonna make it black.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can make that even smaller. So why don't we do like 15?
Mm-hmm. And then also changing the background on that drop down menu.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of keeping it gray, we could go with a lighter gray, close to white, just so we have, so it's like it's not blending into the page, but we're still able to see it that the Shiba, the wording, and the caret is together.
Yeah. So one way that I've done this, I've really been falling in love with HSL colors, which are just another way of kind of describing colors. And one way that I've kind of taken to doing this is I'll find whatever color it is that I'm using for my headings and start there, and then you can just take this lightness, which is
Mm-hmm.
so hue, saturation, lightness. That's HSL, right? So I can just go here and just like boop 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 until it starts to be the right color. And so
Yeah.
now it's not just gray, it's like a
It's still falling into
slightly,
your color palette.
yeah, right? And so and
Yeah.
you can see too, like, check out the difference between this gray and this gray. And I'll even bump the lightness on this a little bit to be more similar. Um just look at like, this is subtle again, but look at the life that comes into this here
Yeah.
compared to this one, which is monochrome, right? So
Yeah.
it makes a big difference.
It's doing that same thing with the show me a dog.
Hmm.
Great.
And so, do you want this to be? Do you think this is the right amount of lightness? Do you want it lighter, darker?
Let's do it a little lighter.
Okay,
Yeah.
about there.
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, let's. That
Yep,
looks
that looks good. And then we can actually let's round out the edges a little bit.
okay.
Just
And we can do, like,
to
this is very subtle. So check this out, y'all. We're
yeah.
at 0, 1. You see? Do you see it move? You can't even see it when you do 1. Just this tiny little bit, and then we go like 2, 3.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Um, okay. So what do you think? Like, are you looking for a really really
Not too much.
subtle
So
or
maybe like a 5.
5?
Yeah,
I like that.
5 is good. Okay, so then we have that. We can even not sure. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so now on the photo, um, we can add that
How about I just
photo
grab one
on.
of these? Let's get. It was almost as if
Ah,
this
that's
Shiba
good.
knew that it was about to be photographed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, he did.
So here's a
Perfect.
photo. And I believe the frame is set up to be, yeah, it just pasted into my frame.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another cool thing is when you start changing the frames, Figma doesn't distort your images. Isn't that great? I feel like that has
Wonderful.
not been my experience with other design tools.
And then we want to round this out too, just
Okay.
so it stays consistent.
Okay.
And
And
so
look
now
at
we
that,
got
just that, like we did nothing. We did literally nothing here.
yeah.
We pasted in an image, we added a little bit of rounded corners, and look how nice, like this looks like an app. If you open this, you wouldn't look at it and go, well, this looks like somebody just threw something on a page. Like this looks nice.
It's those really small things.
It
It's
really
the
is.
rounded edges. It's the colors. It's just changing something very, very small. It
Mm-hmm.
makes a big impact.
Absolutely. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's do the button. So for the button, do you keep the same radius?
I let's see how it looks. Let's see the differences. So we could keep it the same radius as the picture and the drop down menu. And then let's change out the color just so we can see how the button will look with this rectangle
Yes. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger because I want to play with
colors. He looks
button
so
colors.
happy. Just love it.
So if we have, oops, what do you think? Maybe a blue button, like a nice calming blue button.
Yeah, let's do a blue,
I feel like we're gonna have to
like
mess
a
with the
blue
HSL a little bit
green,
on this.
maybe.
So here's another thing. We're still in the palette, even though this isn't exactly in the photo,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's another thing that I love about HSL is that if you kind of find the neighborhood that you're trying to be in. Um, so like here's in this is a similar, but this one's a green. So if we kind of like, hey, let's bump the
Move it up.
saturation up a little
Yeah.
bit and bump up the lightness a little bit. What do you think? Do you like the green or the blue?
I like the green. I mean, green or blue works really well. Those are common colors for buttons to go somewhere. Um, of course, you want to avoid like the reds and the yellows, because those are more of like warnings or don't do it or
Mm-hmm.
cancel buttons. So green or blue, those are usually happy colors to get users clicking in the right direction. So when we're talking about experience, like user experience, this is the same thing where we want to keep it consistent with other applications.
For sure. And so do you think like going with this beachy vibe, do we want to go all the way up to like a sea foam here? Or what do you think? Do we want to keep it there? Do we want to go with more of like a darker, like brighter green?
Um, let's find something in between that, because we're using that dark gray at the bottom.
Mm,
I don't want it to be too far off, where it's just we see a bright green button and then a really dark footer.
okay.
So we want to have something a little brighter but softer, if that makes sense.
Brighter but softer. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe like
Yeah, there.
here-ish?
I think we're going in the right direction. Yeah, but we want to stay away from like neon.
Yeah. For
Yeah, because neon against white, that just hurts.
mm-hmm. Okay, so
So
how about this as a color? This is
okay, I think that looks good. I think the,
okay.
the gray at the bottom looks a little greenish, so it kind of it goes together. I think. Is
So
it on the green
this is
side or the
definitely
blue
pulling
side?
out of the blue.
The blue
So
side.
if we wanted them to like really matchy matchy, we'd probably go with a blue button.
Blue side. Yeah.
Do you want to try that?
Let's try the blue.
Okay, so let's take this. I'm going to select here and then let's pull it over to kind of like a blue,
There you go. I think
like
that works a little better.
that maybe.
Yeah.
And now we've got,
Then
this is
then we
pretty
have
dang
the
cohesive.
sunshine. So the sunshine of our beachy game.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
The blue skies.
I love this. I think this is, I mean, this is fun. Like, okay, so then the last thing that we need to do is get this text looking right. So did we want to use the same font as here?
So what I would usually do is I would use that same blue and go darker. That's
Oh,
on
so
the
you're
button.
going, okay, all right. So use this same blue
Hmm. And
and
then we go
then,
darker.
okay. And are you going like the same darker, like this dark?
Actually, you know what? I just thought of that because we used the blue and we went lighter. So it would be that same blue.
It
Yeah,
definitely
that
could be,
dark
yeah.
blue. Yeah, it could be. And that would work. Just so it's not black, but it's not a different color.
Mm-hmm.
Because then if we were using like a dark green, then it would be like a dark green on a blue. So then you want
Right.
to keep like the blue on blue, but we're using like a lighter blue and a darker blue. And that's just like that that again is like a subtle way to change the way that something looks in a good way.
Yeah. And this has got a nice, again, it's like subtly cohesive. We pulled colors out of this photo for, every single color on this page, with the exception of this photo, is
Mm-hmm.
sourced right out of this image, which is, I think, it's just so nice how quickly that all starts to feel like it belongs in the same page.
Yep.
Um, and then would you go with like your sans serif font, or would you go with your heading font here?
I would stick with the sans serif
Okay.
only
So,
because we don't have like paragraphs on here for headings. That font that we use that the for show me a dog, I feel like that's more of like the header, like the
mhm.
main thing. So we can keep that separate, and then keep everything else the text the same at the bottom.
Okay. And what do you think about the sizing here?
I think it's a little big.
Okay. So
Um,
do you want to go? So we did 20 on the other one. Is that
mhm.
maybe a little
Let's
small?
probably a 24.
24. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, I think 24 is good. Just so that there's space on the sides of the text, just so we know that it's a button, and it because if it fills it, it might look like just a block of text.
Mm-hmm.
Here it kind of looks a little bit more like, okay, show me a dog. Let me click on that.
Yeah.
And then we can also put a little shadow behind the button,
Oh,
just so it
okay.
looks like it's popping out of the page a little bit.
Okay.
So
So
they
I'm going
know
to
like,
open
okay,
up
hey,
my,
this is a button.
here are my effects.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a drop shadow. I'm going to click this button here, which will let me actually change things up. And so let's see, this one goes left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this one goes up and down. So we can move that shadow around. And then we've got the blur. So if
Mm-hmm.
I do, this is going to be easier to see if I move this out. So if we've got 0 blur, it's just another rectangle.
Yep.
If we go lots of blur, it turns into like a smudge.
Mm-hmm.
And then spread goes out. Okay. All right. I understand the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach doing this?
So what shadows do is basically to give um, when the user looks at something, they're drawn to shadows because it feels real. It feels
Mm,
more lifelike. So we want to make sure that the shadows are going in the correct direction. That's probably why Figma's defaulted for the shadow to be at the bottom
mm-hmm.
when you click on it. So we can keep it at the bottom. We can move it a little left if we want. If we're thinking about the light's going to be on our top right or the top left, we can move the shadow either to the bottom left or the bottom right. But I think that leaving it there is fine. I would blur it a little more,
Okay.
only because this is very, very dark for the shadow. Um, I would probably blur it to about a 10, so
Okay.
it's not too harsh. And then you can even change out the color of the shadow too. I mean, you can keep it the black, that works, but I still keep it with going with the colors, so a darker blue,
Right.
um, or if we're using green, then a darker green, just so that then that shadow is kind of blending in with or going well with the button color.
Yeah. And so if we have this
And
up
then you
here,
can
like we
change the
could do,
opacity.
and you can do it a lot of ways. Like you can do it with alpha, or we can pull it up into this kind of like gray register here. And
Mhm.
like, so just so everybody's looking, like, look at the naturalness of this shadow. So when it's black, it doesn't look very natural.
Mhm.
When we pull it toward this gray, it looks a little bit more natural, but still pretty extreme. But then when we start to pull it up into these like gray tones, like that kind of, I mean, I kind of believe that's popping out of the screen a
Yeah.
little bit.
Hmm. So that works.
Okay, so we've got a button.
So, so now it looks like a button.
It looks like a button. Should we
It
play
looks
with
like a
the
button.
like weights or anything of this? Do you ever mess with like light text, heavy text, things like that to do any of that?
I do, depending on the size of it. So if we were to make the text smaller, say that we wanted to keep that size 20 on that text, then I could bold it and I can make the tracking of it wider. So then it fills up a little bit more of the space. So we could bump that up. So now we got, that subtle change in it. I'm keeping the sizing consistent with the sizing of the buttons text, consistent with the sizing of the drop down text.
Mm-hmm.
We could do that, but by just changing the weight of it and the tracking of it, it makes that much of a difference.
Yeah. I mean, this is and like I don't know about y'all chat, but like that little difference of like adjusting the tracking of the text where I just went over here and made it go wider so you can make this really absurd, right? But if you just do it
Yeah.
subtly, it looks really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And that extra weight, and so now this really looks like a button now, which is
Yep.
pretty dang cool. And so I'm gonna group these real quick because I just noticed we've got a different spacing here. So let me group my buttons. This is let's call this the button, and we've got our photo down here, and then we've got our um, filter, right? And then we can
Yep.
take our filter, our button, and our photo, and we can run this like distribute vertical spacing.
Mm-hmm.
Ta-da! And then if I want that to be 30,
Yep.
oh, it's magic.
There you go.
It's so nice. Look how clean that is. Oh,
It does it for you. It's perfect. All right. Then we got that. And then if we want to see how the button will look as like a pill button, you can do that as well.
mm-hmm.
That's easy as clicking on the background and changing that out. That's what I like about Figma too, is that we could play around with things, and that it's easy to like see it and like see how it's going to look versus a different way.
Yeah. I mean, this is fantastic. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer the pill or the rounded?
Both look really good, but I actually do prefer the rectangle,
Okay, let's go
only because
back.
other two are going with rectangles. Um, we can even change out the photo to be a circle, just like the one at the that you have at the top. But I wouldn't do that only because the icon is already a circle. Then you're just
Mm,
having like a circle and a circle. So I like keeping it like that just to show like different shapes.
yeah.
You don't want too many of the like because it's its own thing at the top, for it to take away from the one at the bottom.
I
I
mean,
think.
like, what do you think, chat? We should ship this, right? Like, I feel like we made ourselves an app. I'm gonna one thing that I forgot to do is I made this solid black when we started, so I can just make it the
Oh yeah, we can make that.
this color, and I believe that's all the things we did. Oh wait, that also needs to be our fill color. Oh goodness. Just with like it's so subtle and it makes such a big difference, and I
Yeah.
feel like we now have a really good looking app over here. Let me just clear this stuff out of the way a little bit, and then let's just simplify. Let's only look at the UI. Here's what we just built, what we just designed, right? And we started with nothing. We blocked this thing out. We so let me just kind of recap actually what you did, because I think it was so It was so systematic and so effective. We started with our mobile design first. We blocked things out by thinking about what the necessary elements were on the page. We looked at how those blocked out elements relate to each other hierarchically. And then we picked our starting point for the design, which was this picture of this Shiba up here, and used that to pull out colors. And then we just did this grouping of making these things all use the same sets of colors, use the same border radius, the shadow on the button to make it look like something that you can click on. And that's really it, right? Like there's no magic that happened today, but look how nice this looks. I'm super impressed. So Lynne, is there anything else that you would do in your normal process that we didn't have time for today that you wanted to shout out?
Research, but I guess we're doing it here when we're asking for everyone's feedback. That's something that's important to design, is asking others what they think of it, getting everyone's opinion, only because it just helps, having fresh pair of eyes, after like looking at it for a while, everything starts to blend together. But I think that's something that's important to know. Getting feedback is really good for new designs and coming up with new things or things that you didn't think of. So play around with it, playing around with design, especially if you're new to it. I mean, I still play around with design like all the time, just so I can see how things will look, just like what we did with the button. Maybe the Poe button would have looked better, or maybe it was this. Then we can ask, hey, what do you guys think? Is the Poe button, well, like, what's the consensus of it? So just feedback and just, see what looks good together. The colors really help. I think that's a very big thing in UI, is if you can get the colors to work cohesively, then I think you're on to like a really good start, like this app.
Absolutely, yeah. So this, I think, is really nice. Komodo Kano, this actually might be a good question for you, Lynne. How do you not feel freaked out when you're learning coding?
How do I not? I always freak out.
You freak out and you do it anyways.
Yeah, you just power through. No. Well, I think that understanding the coding part of it, like as UX and like UI, it's just breaking it down, understanding how to break down, like how we broke down the button itself, work on that. And then break down the drop down, work on that. It looks a lot to learn when it's all there at once. But when you start to take apart the components and focus, it's easier for me anyway to break them down and to understand, okay, my headers first. So then that's what I'm going to work on. I know that my icon's going to go to the left-hand side. So let's start with the icon and then the title, and then you work your way down the hierarchy. I think that was the best way to organize when learning to translate it into code.
Yeah. And I think, what you're bringing up is it's such an important thing for learning in general, right? If you try to learn everything at once, it's always going to feel really big. It's big, it's overwhelming, there's too many things. And so if instead you focus down to just one thing, like I'm not going to learn how to code, I'm going to learn how to put a button on a screen. And that's a tractable exercise. It's, because code is endless. I've been coding for 20 years now and I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but I know how to put a button on a screen, right? I know that one really well. And so breaking it down to each individual step and learning those steps in isolation. And then, as you learn, you start to connect dots and you realize that, oh yeah, buttons are actually really similar to a lot of other elements that you'll put on the screen. And so you don't have to learn from scratch every time. But if you get down to just like the task you're trying to do, This is why I'm so excited about, like, anytime you learn by chasing your curiosity. It's like, I want to accomplish a thing. Okay, great. You have a roadmap, right? It's not like, I want to learn to code. Well, what are you going to code? I don't know. What should I code? Right? Instead, it's a conversation. It's like, I want to build this thing. Okay, great. What's the first step? That's what you should learn first, right?
Yeah.
It tends to make things a little more, definitely a little more palatable, digestible, I guess.
Yeah, in small doses. Take everything
Mhm.
in small doses.
Yeah. With that, I think we've reached an excellent stopping point. I mean, I am. We didn't have time to build this app, which was very much by design. We wanted to spend the whole thing on making it look nice. But I definitely want to build this app. So I am very excited to take this thing all the way through to the finish line. But for folks who want to do more, is there anywhere that you would recommend somebody goes if they're excited about what they learned today and they want to go next steps?
I did a lot of reading when I was learning and when I was starting out. A lot of like Medium articles, a lot of, just researching tips and tricks. There wasn't really a specific one that I got stuck on. It was just because I feel like design
Mm.
is very opinionated and everyone learns differently and, grasps things differently. It was really good to just go down the rabbit hole and just keep on reading and then trying it out, like designing it and then reading
Mhm.
again and then just keep on going. So I don't have anything specific. I mean, I could send you my Google search. My
I
Google
I
search.
have some specifics. Y'all should go and follow Lynne on Instagram because there are tips in here. We can see them happening right now. So there are definitely some tips there that you can follow. You can go to Lynne's website at lynne.codes, and there are case studies, all sorts of good things here. And then you can also follow her on Twitter. So get over there, get those resources. And while you're clicking on things on the internet, make sure you check out the upcoming schedule because we got so much good stuff coming on. Later this week, we're going to talk to Marie Poulin about Notion and managing team workflows. That's going to be amazing. I'm not even going to go into the rest of it. I want you to just go and read through this. Look at this list. Oh, and that's not even the whole list. We're still adding things all the time. If there's somebody you want to see on the show, make sure you let me know. Make sure you let them know. Let them know that you want to see him on Learn with Jason. Just tweet at him or something, and make sure you click this Add on Google Calendar button. So with that, let's do another shout out to our captioning. We've had Jordan with us all day from White Coat Captioning. Thank you so much, Jordan. That's made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, Fauna, Hasura, Auth0, all kicking in to make this show more accessible. Lynne, any parting words for the chat before we go visit somebody else?
This has been very fun. This is really exciting. I enjoyed this. Thank you for
I
having me on here.
I had such a blast. I love doing design stuff, and it was so much fun to design something together with you. And we got to look at Shiba Inus all day. So what a great day this was on so many counts. With that, chat, we are gonna go find somebody to raid. So just like sit tight, get ready. It's gonna happen. Lynne, thank you so much. Everybody, we will see
Thank
you
you.
next time.
Thank you.